Hello everyone and welcome back to Probing Paul, my monthly Q&A series, an experience that is so visceral and stimulating for me that I just keep coming back for more month after month. Although I did skip last month because allowing the body to heal from time to time is a wise choice, but now I'm back and ready for more, and my first question was even asked by someone famous.
Excellent!
So before we dive into the intimate probings, a few housekeeping notes to make note of. One is that this is typically a monthly series, and I usually get the questions that I answer from the last month's episode. So check out the playlist if you haven't already. You can see all the way down the portal of time back to when I use light mode, which is way down there in the past. And of course, if you have any questions for me to answer in the next episode, leave those in the comment section below. I will also occasionally reach out on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PaulHardware without an S, and I did that for this video too, to get a few more questions that were a little bit fresher since most of the ones that were asked in the last episode were from November. With that said, our first question was asked by none other than Pedro. Pedro, PC Master Race. Pedro, who is the supreme dictator for life over on the PC Master Race subreddit, asked me, what is your favorite graphics card of all time? A question that gave me pause. I had to think about it for a second and be like, well, it's hard to say. I've used a lot of different graphics cards. A lot of them have treated me very well. But ultimately, I decided to sort of fudge the answer by giving you two actual answers. The first is a personal favorite of mine, and it's the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 2060 Core 216. An absolute beast with nearly a gigabyte of GDDR3 memory. This one launched back in 2008. Not even really recommended for like 1920 by 1080 gaming, but you could get away with resolutions a little bit lower than that. Actual release date was September 16th, 2008. And there's a few reasons why I really like this card. One is that I actually bought it and the launch price was $299 US. And yes, it makes me somewhat nostalgic for when the 60 class cards from NVIDIA's lineup cost around $300, even less than that sometimes. And I really like the TechPowerUp GPU database because you can go down and look at the different variants of the cards that launched. It looks like EVGA was the main carrier of the Core 216 version of the GTX 2060. This is the actual card that I had, the EVGA blower style cooler. This one also doubled the memory up to 1,792 megabytes, so that was a nice upgrade too. But other than the fact that I actually bought this card, used it pretty extensively, this was the card that I started playing World of Warcraft on back in the day. So I started playing on the graphics card that I used before that, and then I upgraded to this in 2008. But look here, the GTX 2060 Core 216 with 100% performance. But if you look up here a little bit, you can see the actual GTX 260, and the Core 216 was about 10–11% faster than it, according to the TechPowerUp database. But look at this, the original GTX 260 launched in June, so we're only talking about July, August, September, about 3 months prior to the Core 216 model launching. This says launch price was $450. I believe it was actually a $400 launch price for the card. So look at this, they took a 60 class card, they launched it for $400, and then just 3 to 4 months later, they launched a revision of the card that got about 10% more performance, that had variants that could give you more memory as well. And of course, they also increased the price by 10%, right? No, they didn't. They dropped the price. The launch price for this one, like I said, was $300. So 3 to 4 months later, 10% faster card, $100 price drop. And if anyone wonders why reviewers have been frustrated in the past few years with NVIDIA's pricing of their graphics cards, it's because we used to be comfortable with stuff like this. The hardware would get faster, which would give us faster hardware for roughly the same amount of money. Whereas what they've been doing in recent years is being like, oh, the hardware is faster, we're gonna charge you that much more money based on how much faster the hardware is. So the second GPU I chose to answer this question is the revered NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti. This card launched in 2017, just about 6 years ago, and this was the top consumer-focused graphics card of the GTX 10 series generation. 11 gigs of memory, 3,584 CUDA cores. But look at this launch price, $700 US. And yes, that was slightly more than the 980 Ti launched for. The 980 Ti, I believe, was a $650 MSRP card that launched 2 years prior to this one. But the thing about the 1080 Ti that stands out to me is not just the environment that it launched into, but the follow-up generations of graphics cards after that. NVIDIA went to the 20 series after this, the RTX 20 series, where they switched from GTX to RTX. Suddenly they were trying to sell ray tracing optimized cards for way more money. They stacked all of the 20 series cards on top of the 10 series cards in terms of pricing. So I probably do have some rose-tinted glasses looking back at the past here, but the 10 series to me represents the last time NVIDIA was pricing their graphics cards somewhat reasonably in terms of the product stack, as well as the price increase from generation to generation relative to the actual performance increase that they were getting out of the new silicon. And then I guess the last point to make about the 1080 Ti would be that anyone who actually dropped that $700 to $800 on a 1080 Ti at launch was able to keep using that card and keep having it be a top tier card for an extended period of time after that. So it was one of those cards that you got a lot of value for the money out of. And that just seems to be something that NVIDIA really doesn't want to provide their customers anymore. I hope they change their minds at some point. But thank you very much for that question, Pedro. Let's move on to the next one from Chandler Solomon. Have there been any thoughts with the office space allowed to expand your team farther than just Joe? So this question brings a few different thoughts to my mind. I'll try to get through them quickly. First, I've always liked having a very small team because honestly, I don't like having a lot of responsibility. So having more people to me has always equaled more responsibility. And while I greatly appreciate and respect like what Linus has done in terms of expanding his team and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I've always thought that I like having my nice, small, close-knit team, which is basically me, Joe, and then I also have another teammate, Jennifer, who helps with ad sales and coordination. Now, there was a time, somewhat recently, when I started to greatly regret my MO of having a pretty small team and not many other people who can do other things similar to the things that I do, and that was during the COVID pandemic. I had a really difficult time keeping up with content during 2020 and 2021 because not only of COVID, but also my wife works full-time and also was raising a young daughter. So that was the time most recently when I thought to myself, you know what, if I had expanded the team even just one or two other people, it probably would have given me a lot more flexibility to get through that time without having to just be like, well, I'm not gonna make videos this week because I'm too busy doing other things. That said, now that we've largely gotten past those somewhat difficult years, I do still have the thought to expand my team, but I'm expanding it in a slightly different way than you're asking. Joe's incredibly dedicated and diligent in terms of his work ethic, and he always puts in a lot of work, but I've always really considered him to be something like a 2/3 time employee, so he still has other time to do his own thing or to possibly seek out other freelance work if he needed to. But in recent months, I have been steering him more towards being a full-time employee. We're changing up how things work a little bit behind the scenes of bringing him on as an official employee rather than a contractor. So before I get to that step that you're talking about, like hiring an additional entire person or looking into that, I am focusing now on making better use of Joe's time more as a full-time employee, and yes, he got a raise as well. Moving on to the next question from Da Poets, aka Terrence. If you dabble in TikTok and you want an awesome channel to follow that's way more prolific at posting there than I am, I highly recommend following him there. He also has YouTube channels and other social medias as well. And this is a multifaceted question, so I'm gonna try to get through this fairly quickly. First part, what was the best food that you had at CES? And this is actually Kyle's vlog. It was this meal at Breza that I attended along with Brian. We were invited by our friends from Height, so big thank you to Height for inviting us to this meal. But yeah, we had this tomahawk steak that was ridiculous. The entire meal was absolutely amazing. Pedro joined us there as well, so that was a really nice meal. It was towards the end of the week too, so that was very satisfying for me to sort of finish it off with some yummy food. I also had a great meal that Terrence joined us for at Yardbird, which is also really good. But yeah, I gotta go with Breza because it was just really good there. They had octopus that was like really good octopus. Let's finish off these questions though. Will you do another high quality water-cooled build soon for educational purposes? It's an idea in my head. I have not made specific plans further in the future, possibly later in 2023. I'd like to do another one. It was great seeing you at CES. I agree. Same goes to you, Terrence. I'm glad we got to sit down for that meal. But this question too, especially for anyone who might be going to CES, what is your basic strategy for surviving CES? CES is really cool. I enjoy it every time that I go, but it's also madness. It's pretty chaotic the entire time. So for one, I typically drive out there because it's only about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from here in LA. It's roughly the same time it takes to, oh, I also left my wallet at home on this trip, which wasn't good. But driving allows us to bring along full desktop computers and set up in our hotel room to have like a nice editing configuration. In the past, I want to say 3 or 4 times that I've gone, I've stayed at the Palazzo, which is right there in the center of everything. It's also very expensive, so you have to pay a bit for that. But a big reason for that is the location. So here's Las Vegas, or Paradise, the area that's south of the actual city of Las Vegas, and the convention center is right up here. But I actually don't like going to the convention center because there tends to be very few actual PC hardware vendors there. So like I said, I've been staying at the Palazzo. There is a thing called the Sands Venetian Palazzo Exposition Center that's right in here, right in between the Venetian and the Palazzo. That is where the majority of the PC tech hardware vendors have been in recent years. So it means that I can just go downstairs from my room to go to the meetings and go back up to the stairs to the room to drop off footage and stuff like that. and it really minimizes the amount of times that I have to leave this area, because if you leave this area, you can't really walk much further than maybe a block or two down. I've walked as far as maybe down to the Bellagio from there. Or Caesar's Palace also often has a convention center with vendors that might have rooms set up. None were there this year that I actually visited. But yeah, walking distance to Caesar's and the Bellagio, access to the Sands Convention Center right there, and then they have trams that go up Sands Avenue over to the actual convention center. Even if I was just to say, like, I don't want to go on the tram, I want to just pay for a taxi, the amount of time you have to wait in a cab line, the amount of time it takes a cab just to get over to the convention center because it's so insanely crowded during the event, has caused me to be pretty confident in my choice to stay there. And it also means that outside of this little area right in here, I don't tend to visit many other places. I went out to the Palms because that's where Cooler Master typically is. But like EK, I wanted to visit EK, but they were all the way down at Mandalay Bay this year, and I was like, no, it's too far. It's too far for me to go. But yeah, those are my strategies for CES, staying in a central location, booking meetings in groups, so finding out where vendors are located so I can be like, all right, I'm gonna hit 1, 2, 3, 4 that are all in this same location, so I don't actually have to be traveling back and forth, because traveling from one location to another can be a matter of 20 to 30 minutes, and it can even be 45 minutes to an hour if you're in that crush of time when everyone's trying to get a cab at the same time or everyone's trying to get an Uber or a Lyft at the same time. The logistics of moving around Las Vegas are pretty messed up during CES, and that's another reason why I really like Computex, is because Computex pretty much has 2 locations and they have an MRT, so you can just jump on that to go back and forth between them. Moving along, I have a few more questions. I'm going to try to get through the rest of them a little bit faster. KarenNag7688 asks, I like the content you produce. Thank you very much. Question, do you use antivirus software on your PCs? If yes, what's your go-to solution? And if not, why? So the short answer here is no. I typically do not run antivirus software. I run Windows Defender, and I keep Microsoft Windows via Windows Update up to date as often as possible. My reasons why would be, first, that I feel like antivirus software kind of comes and goes. There's various companies in the past that have done really well, but then have fallen off in terms of the quality of their antivirus software or how much system resources it takes up in the background. But then the second reason is that I typically try to follow best practices for internet browsing. It's been a very long time since I felt the need to seek out like free software that you're trying to get from some shady area of the interwebs. I also treat the internet kind of like I do like calls that come into my phone. I don't trust any of them. I assume that everything is a scam unless proven otherwise, and that hopefully has kept me from clicking on bad links or being otherwise misled. Apart from that though, I try also not to divulge too many of the details in terms of like my practices for security around here, so that's where I'm going to leave my answer for that question, and thank you for asking it. Here's a sort of a random question from iCollege. I have a question. Have you ever considered building your own arcade cabinet? They have. They found it very highly rewarding. There are multiple parts of it. There's the woodworking part, there's the componentry part, there's software configuration, script writing, printing stuff for the sides, and of course playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Edition on an actual arcade machine is super nostalgic and an excellent experience. Right, so here's a slightly older arcade cabinet build from the channel I Like to Make Stuff. If you guys are interested, I'll link this down in the video's description. I'm just having this play in the background because I've never done anything remotely like this. I will say that I was in the process of setting up sort of a woodworking area on the side of my house back right before COVID struck. Things got kind of pushed back after COVID and having a child and everything like that. So yes, a project like this sort of has all the hallmarks of like the maker side of things, the PC side of things, and one of the really cool things about like gaming PCs is the whole emulation side of it. And another reason this question sort of stood out to me a little bit is that I've actually been getting into emulation a little bit more than I have in the past because I have a daughter who's 3.5 now, and I've been introducing her very slowly to some of the games that I really liked. So I recently had her try out The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for Super Nintendo. I had her try Super Mario World, although I think she had a little bit more difficult time on that, just it being a platformer that requires a little bit better like fast reaction time. Long story short though, I will say this is something I'm interested in, but kind of along the lines of that water-cooled build question that Terrence asked me. It's something that's in my brain for a future date. I have not made definitive plans to go ahead with something like that though. I think first step is going to be getting back to that woodworking area on the side of my house so I can have an actual place to cut wood and use my tools and everything. Oh, and like I said, I will link this video in the description if you'd like to see someone actually build an arcade cabinet. This is a 2-part video and he did a great job. Moving along, we have some more random questions to sort of finish things out. Chris, CCM1092, thank you for your question. If you could go back in time, what time period would you want to go back to? This one's a little bit more heady, a bit more existential. And there are definitely some further details I would want to ask you about before I made that call. Like, if you're going back in time, are you just going to be dropped somewhere like as yourself and be a physical person and have to live out the rest of your life in that time period? Or are we talking about somewhere where you can go back in time and just observe? All the way back when I used to work at Newegg on the internal development team, we had sort of an ongoing question that we would kind of ask about this. It was about like what happens when you die, and one of the options we considered was that you became a ghost who could travel through time. So you could go back in time sort of as a ghost and see things and move around through time and do all that sort of stuff. And my question was always like, are there other time traveling ghosts who you can talk to about and be like, oh my gosh, look at this, it was so cool. So yeah, those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. If you're just being dropped into a time period as a physical person and you're gonna have to deal with, possibly being accused of, I don't know, being a witch or a warlock and being dismembered or otherwise experiencing physical pain or death, then I might just be like, you know what, I'm okay right here in 2023. But if I was to go back and I had a little bit more like sort of omnipresent kind of powers to move around and not fear for my life, I would want to go back to where these like the 7 wonders of the ancient world were built. I actually watched them being built. There's a lot of questions as to how many of these structures were assembled and put together. I don't know why they're showing the Golden Gate Bridge in this video, but especially some of these wonders that like are completely lost now. I mean, we know that they did exist, but they've been since destroyed. It'd be really cool to see those. And even though I know there was a lot of like humanitarian issues with how a lot of these structures were built, I think that's what has the most draw for me, to satisfy my curiosity about how some of this stuff went down. Other time period things like the Bronze Age collapse was a big question and stuff. Oh, like the Colossus of Rhodes too. It's fascinating stuff, but I'm getting off topic. Thank you for your question. Chris, next one is from Me. This is the last question, a very important one. Socks and sandals during LTX. So LTX is the Linus Tech Tips Expo. I don't know what it actually is, if it's just LTX. But anyway, that's coming this summer, July 29th and 30th at the Vancouver Convention Center. And I am planning to go at this point. I think there are still some logistics and planning things to be confirmed and whatnot, but like, what are they charging these days? Oh my goodness. General admission, 35 bucks. You can add on some stuff for this, and this. You can get some VIP packages all the way up to whale, 10 grand? I guess 5,000 of that is for a custom computer, but all right. I wonder who's gonna pay for that. But anyway, yes, I am planning to go to LTX 2023, and no, I will not be wearing socks and sandals. Call me weird, but there are some articles of clothing that I do not find nearly as uncomfortable as other people. For instance, jeans. I'm perfectly comfortable in jeans. Jeans. Son of a bitch. Jeans. I think I just said jeans. Jeans. Like, I hear people talk about, they come home from work and like the first thing they do is just strip their jeans off because jeans are so uncomfortable. I could almost sleep in jeans for some reason. As long as it's not too hot and I'm not getting sweaty or trying to do something like physical labor or exercise or something like that, I'm cool with jeans. Same thing generally goes for shoes for me. Like, shoes are just fine. I don't necessarily need to have sandals like with socks to have that like airflow plus some sort of enclosure for my foot. I'm okay just wearing a shoe with a sock, and if it gets too hot to the point where shoes and socks feel too hot, then I will just wear sandals, because that's totally fine. I wear sandals like for pretty much half of the year here, because once it starts to get hot in Southern California, I switch to wearing sandals almost full time. And I won't even try to convince you guys that there's some sort of like aesthetic or fashion sense to the socks and sandals thing. I mean, that is part of my reasoning, but it's more practical for me. I don't want my socks to get wet if I'm wearing socks and sandals. Like, that's just what it comes down to. I want some additional protection for the socks if I'm wearing socks. Socks should be worn with shoes. Sandals should be worn with bare feet. That's the way the world should work. I don't know why this is even a debate. I feel like it makes perfect sense to anyone who's not half insane in their head, like Linus. But speaking of half insane people, if you guys would like to leave me any comments or questions for the next time I do a probing poll, by all means, leave those down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and checking out this video and listening to me yammer on about various things that people have asked me questions about. A closing reminder to check out my store at paulshardware.net if you'd like to buy some merch and help support my channel. We are having a hoodie sale right now. A great time to buy a hoodie because it's still winter, and we are clearancing a bunch of the hoodies we currently have so we can bring in some new ones later this year. But if you guys enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button on the way out and let me know. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're not already for more tech videos coming at you real soon. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.